Cool. Okay. Well, yeah, thanks for joining us, Alison. And we spoke briefly before around ergonomics and safety. I thought a good place to start would be kind of like what got you passionate in that area and what kind of got you into the industry.
Great question. My personal and professional values have always been about making a difference to people, and I actually started off in social care, so exploring it that way. And then as my role, I became a manager, health and safety became a bigger and bigger part of my role, and I actually took the sideways step into health and safety because I could see that I could make a difference to even more people that way. So I started my own business way back in 2011, and as the safety elf, and I was a good health and safety generalist, but with real niche passion for posture. But at the time, it wasn't a big seller. And then COVID happened, and there were so many conversations happening about how do I work from my dining room table, my bed, my sofa, my dressing table, all of those things. And so I was really busy during COVID helping people who'd made that sudden unplanned transition to home working. And I thought, once we come out of this, the interest will just drop off. But it didn't. It stayed a hot topic, because as we all know, we've got so much more hybrid working, home working, hot desking. So I made the decision to really specialize in my particular passion niche. So hence health and safety, but with a real niche passion for desk-based working.
Yeah, I love that. And it's amazing how many conversations you hear around that of people getting into safety. A lot of people, I guess it's a cliche, but they don't grow up wanting to be a health and safety manager. But they quickly discover when they get into it, quite oftentimes you'll be a HR professional, you'll get tasked with health and safety roles and tasks and responsibilities. But fundamentally, it attracts people who are really passionate about keeping people safe and healthy. So why it's such a good space to work in.
Absolutely. I think there's still a huge myth that health and safety is about paperwork, but it isn't. It's about people. And if you're doing the right things for your people, the paperwork becomes easy because all you're doing is capturing the great stuff that you're already doing. The problem comes when the stuff that you're doing and the compliance, there's a real mismatch, and that's where people struggle.
Yeah, absolutely. And the subject today is, ergonomics in safety, particularly looking at office work. So we ran the study on, I think it was around 200 participants within offices on how their desk setup looks like, what the risks are, how it can be improved. I was just wondering, and going back to, I guess, COVID really, have you noticed with hybrid working, have things gotten better since that sudden push to people working from home in terms of desk setups?
No, I honestly, I wish I could say I thought it had got better. I think it's just become more challenging, and that's on both sides, from the employer side and the employee side. People, so many times, people are telling me, that they don't know what they're trying to achieve, so they don't know how to do it in the office, and it's even worse when they're at home and trying to make do with what they've got. So I think there's a huge missing education piece, and I think that came out in the survey. 55% of your respondents said they'd had no guidance to support their home working setup, for example. So it's a challenge. It is absolutely a challenge, and things like hot desking have made it even harder, because people are having to completely reset every time they come to a desk. And it's the time, it doesn't, once you get used to it, it doesn't take long. But if you don't really know what you're doing and you're fumbling around trying to make it work for you, it can feel a really frustrating start to your day, when actually you just want to sit at your desk and just get on. So that's what people do. They sit at their desk, they just get on, and they put up with the setup that they've inherited from the last person who's out there.
So yeah, we've covered some of the initial risks around home working. Was there anything else there we wanted to unpack on in a bit more detail?
Yeah, I just wanted to mention the health effects of sedentary working as well.
Yeah, no, absolutely. Let's get into that.
Okay, So that there's another layer to the risk of any desk-based working, and that's about our increasingly sedentary lifestyles. There's a lot of research, including fascinatingly from NASA and astronauts working in zero gravity, that there's real connection there, that there are real negative health effects associated with our very sedentary lifestyles. So for me, there's really two strands. It's about the way we're sitting, about the way we set ourselves up, but it's also about the real value of adding in frequent movement breaks into our working day. So I spend quite a lot of time trying to help people spot the easy hacks that allows them to build movement into their day.
Yeah, absolutely. And I know, looking at our survey, quite a lot of people responded that they didn't actually get, well, whether it's enough or not is, I guess debatable, but they weren't getting much movement at all during the day. What are some of the ways that people can start to build that into their routine?
It's really seizing every opportunity you can to move. So any little gaps in your day. So perhaps your virtual meeting finishes, and it's finding those triggers as well. So perhaps something like, every time my virtual meeting finishes, I'll stand up. Even if you don't have a chance to go for a walk, the research from NASA shows that just literally the act of standing up and movement against gravity is really great for our bodies. So I've had clients who've done things like they've got one centralized bin in the office, so that and you're not allowed to have little rubbish piles on your desk either. So you have to get up to put your rubbish in the bin. It might be, instead of having a really big water bottle on your desk, you have just a glass of water on your desk, so that actually there's a reason to walk to the kitchen to refill the water. And then obviously staying hydrated brings the other drive for movement for bathroom breaks. So there's all kinds of things.
Yeah, absolutely. And it's about like making the environment as optimized as possible for that end outcome, isn't it? It leads us on quite nicely to DSE assessments. What does a good DSE assessment look like?
It should be really holistic. So it's understanding the individual, the environment they're working with, exactly as you said, and the culture that they're working with. Are just drawing on that last bit of our conversation, are they working in a culture where being away from your desk is seen as a negative thing? If people feel guilty about physically leaving their desk, they're far less likely to move. Understanding the work that they do, and actually understanding helping people understand what they really do. Some people know, when I ask them about what a typical day looks like, they'll tell me really clearly. But other people actually haven't really reflected on perhaps how much they move in a day, what kind of postures they adopt during the day. So actually encouraging people, some people can be really disconnected from their bodies. It's all about the screen, and it's all about the external things. So it's really encouraging people to connect with their bodies, notice what their bodies are telling them, and actually take action a bit sooner. For me, a big part is education, because when I've worked with someone, I want them to understand what we're trying to aim for and why it matters, so that even when I'm not there, and then equip them with key posture principles to apply. So even when I'm not there, they know they can think, okay, today I'm working on a train. I can't make that a fully ergonomic workspace, but think about those principles. I can do this and make it a little bit better. So I think education is a huge piece of the puzzle. Agreeing changes that are realistic, and that might mean that actually you introduce things in phases rather than changing everything, which can just feel overwhelming, and actually people are much more likely to then go back to what they used to do because it just feels like too much. So much of it is habit, and whatever your posture habit is, if this is where you hang out, we can sit you on £1,000 chair and your instinct will still be to do this. And we know how hard it is to change habits. So actually it's a lot about, so the education helps, so people are more invested in making the change, but actually supporting people through that change process. I think is really important.
Yeah, I read somewhere that people, I don't know how true this is, but people who are naturally quite fidgety sometimes tend to get on better when it comes to having an optimized ergonomic setup. Yeah, is that true? Is that something you see?
People often say to me, or in a really apologetic way, "Oh, I'm a bit of a fidgeter," and I celebrate fidgeters because you're driven to move. So actually, you're doing brilliant things for your body. You know, your body is asking you to do it, and you're doing it. So that's the fantastic thing about being a fidgeter, is you're automatically building that frequent movement pattern into your day, which is amazing.
Nice, good to hear. Looking to dedicated home office setups, obviously a lot of people don't have that. And looking at our survey responses, the biggest obstacle people flagged was space within their home to creating a good setup. What are some of the ways that people can get around that?
I think it can be really challenging, because if you're in a bedsit, for example, you may not even have a separate, any kind of table surface that you can use that's private to be on virtual calls, things like that. So it can be really challenging to find a space. So I would say find the best space that you can, that you've got. It doesn't have, yes, the ideal, we'd all have a desk and an adjustable chair, but actually there's so much you can do with the simple things that you've possibly already got at home. It's really about optimizing those things that you've got and trying to work out how it fits around your life. So it might be that you have all portable bits of equipment, so that you set yourself up on a kitchen table, or maybe on a breakfast bar as a standing, as a temporary standing desk. But it's things that you can take away at the end of the working day, so you're not having to have a dedicated space. And it's looking at, maybe you're sitting on a chair that isn't adjustable, but trying to think, how can I apply the principles that are really important? Do I need to sit on a couple of firm cushions to raise myself a bit higher? Am I getting any back support? Because often the dining room chairs are more designed for, relaxed conversation around a dining table, rather than supporting us in a good working posture. So it's about sort of strategic use of things like cushions, pillows, rolled up towels, to kind of give ourselves padding in the right place to actually make the chair or the desk that you're sitting on work the best that it can for you. Absolute basics. A real starting point is, if you're working off a laptop, have a separate keyboard and mouse. That's the absolute starting point, so that you can free yourself from having to have the screen down low because you need to be able to use the keyboard. Then you can use something just simple like a biscuit tin or a stack of books to raise your laptop screen. It just gets rid of this closed in head tilt that we're all guilty of doing at times. So that I would say is the starting point. Separate keyboard and mouse, raise up your laptop screen, give your neck a break. That's a really good place to start.
Yeah, and looking at the wider kind of posture element of how you sit most effectively in a desk, what does that look like?
Well, ideally, actually holding yourself up for a whole working day gets really tiring. So ideally, you want your chair to nurture you, not be forcing you, but just nurturing you into a good kind of neutral, what I call neutral posture, which is head stacked over shoulders, shoulders stacked over hips. Sorry, David, I've forgotten questions.
What does the best kind of like desk setup look like in terms of posture, how you're sitting?
Yes. So if you have got the option of a height adjustable chair, what we're actually aiming for is, people often start, when they sit down at a desk, their starting point is, are my feet flat on the floor? Because no one likes to sit there with, legs dangling, or, kind of all scrunched up if you're tall. that's actually not the starting point. The starting point is that when your arms are hanging naturally from your shoulder and you put a 90-degree angle in your elbow, you want your forearms to be just floating above the desk surface, so that when you mouse and type, your arms sort of stay in a nice neutral posture. You're not having to do this or this to get to your keyboard or mouse. So that's actually the starting point. And that's why I was saying often people need to raise, might find that they need to raise themselves up on something like firm cushions or pillows. And then it's looking at the back support. So if you've got a shaped lumbar curve and it's adjustable, is the lumbar curve actually in your lumbar curve? I typically find it way too low down, so that the bulge is actually pushing people forward off their seat. So they're actually almost forced into their hips being in front of their shoulders. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
So yes, make sure that's happening. Try and either adjust the back angle if you've got that adjustment, or pad it so that you get some support at the back. Because this is half the time while we start to lean and lounge, is we're actually seeking support. Your body's tired from holding itself up, and you're trying to seek support of the arms of the chair, which may be too low or too high, or leaning forward onto the desk. So it's actually about literally giving yourself, nurturing your body in that nice neutral stacked posture, so you're not having to do the hard work of holding yourself there.
Yeah, nice. So we've covered some of the challenges of home working. We've covered how to sit most effectively in your chair. One of the things which was a first to me when I entered the world of work was standing desks. Now, one of the things we spoke about when we did our discovery call was whether people are using them or not. Our office is kitted out with every desk a standing desk, but you're lucky if you see one or two up at any given time. Are they the answer?
They're an answer. They're a great piece in the toolkit. But you're absolutely right. I've also been into offices where I know that they are equipped with standing desks, but if you look around the room, you wouldn't know. So, and there's lots of reasons for that. What I often find is that if you've got someone in the office who's a real fan of standing, then people start to get interested. And also, nobody wants to be the one literally sticking their head over the parapet. They don't want to be the whir of the desk as it goes up and everyone looks around to see what the noise is. Nobody wants to be that first person. So having someone who's a real champion for it is a great way. The other thing I think is people, again, it's education. People think, oh, I've been given a standing desk, that means I have to stand. And so they perhaps stand for half a day and they're absolutely exhausted at the end of that and go, well, that was a really bad experience. I'm never doing that again. Standing desks work best. We're not designed to do any one thing all day. A happy body is a recipe for happy body is some sit, some stand, some move. So it might be that you stand for 20 minutes, sit for 10 and then go for a short walk to the kitchen. That would be lovely for your body. Don't try and stand. As soon as you notice signs of fatigue, that we talked about, the leaning or the hitching on one hip, or then that's your body's signs that it's getting tired and it would like to sit down, and that's fine. Give it a sitting break but then stand again. It's that frequent cycling between sit, stand, move that really works the best.
Yeah, nice. And one final question regarding employers. We've obviously covered a lot today. There's potential that people get a little bit overwhelmed by it. What's the one thing you would ask employers to do regarding helping people work safely from their desks?
I think the biggest change, there are lots, but the one thing I'm going to tease out here is build movement into your culture. So things like make it a rule that virtual calls always finish at 5 minutes, 5 minutes to the hour or 5 minutes. So people have an opportunity. They're not in back-to-back meetings. There's actually an opportunity to move, to stand and to move. Allow people to be camera off for some time in their meeting, so that again they have the choice to stand up if they want to in that time. if you're having in-person meetings or virtual meetings, why not suggest a standing break if it goes on for longer than 20 minutes? Because we know that 20 minutes is, that's kind of an optimum time to be moving. It's not just about the body. It changes the energy dynamic. It gives you a burst of blood flow, which boosts your productivity because it's feeding oxygen to your brain. There's so many positives around it. Walking meetings, standing briefings, just things to start to build movement, permission, and encouragement to move into culture would be fantastic.
Cool. Okay, we've touched a lot around the specifics around how people can work better from their desks. I was wondering, what are some of the wider health and safety context of it?
That's a great question, because I think it's often really overlooked. So it's things like electrical safety. So if you imagine someone setting up in their home, it's asking those questions about, are they daisy chaining or overloading electrical sockets? Just they may not know that that's an important issue. So if you don't even ask the question, give them the information about why that's important. It might be about, sadly, we discovered a lot during COVID about people's domestic situations and their personal safety. So it's actually, you might want to just do a check-in about their personal safety at home. And fire safety obviously sits very well with electrical safety. So if you imagine in the winter, perhaps someone is working in quite a small space, they're trying to heat it with a plug-in heater, which they might be daisy chaining, or one of those old plug adapters where you plug in sort of three or four things, because they've only got one power socket and they have no idea that actually doing that, because they just concentrating on being warm while they work. And that heater might be right next to where they're storing papers and things. So then you have a fire risk. And people wouldn't necessarily know that, because that stuff is ideally in the office, that those risks are done for them. So they don't necessarily know that it's risks they need to consider for themselves at home working. Slip and trip hazards, things like, is the cable to your laptop 6 inches off the ground, because that's the only way you can get it to the power point, but actually that's the way everybody's walking past, and it's only a matter of time before someone's going to trip over it. Those kind of questions and a bit of background information about why you're asking them can be really helpful. And I think the other missing piece, going back to the workstation setup, is that people may be being asked questions about, are you okay with your setup at work? But how do you know that this person could be bouncing on the edge of their bed to work and saying, yes, I'm absolutely fine? So one of the other things I encourage people to do is actually ask for photographs. So send in photographs of the workstation, and if there's someone else at home that can do it, send in a photograph of the person at their workstation. So you've got something you can advise on about the setup, because you can see it. Because otherwise, no one's expecting people to go around to people's homes and do home office, home setup inspections. But there's so many ways we can help people who are home workers if we can actually see what they're doing.
Yeah, absolutely. It's such a good point. And home working, we do a lot on lone working and the support around that at HSE Network. Quite oftentimes, home workers are also lone workers, but you don't really think about that in this context.
Yes, and it can bring extra layers of stress and mental health impact as well, because if you're working in your home, do you feel you can switch off? Are you able to close the door on your workspace and literally physically leave it? Or does it sit there all the time, just kind of reminding you about work and making that disconnect really difficult?
Yeah, absolutely. And I know you mentioned earlier about a great resource that you wanted to share as well.
Yes, the Chartered Institute of Ergonomics and Human Factors, the CIEHF, they've produced a great infographic about setup of home working. It's it was brought out during COVID, but it's still absolutely relevant. So I think that encapsulates quite a lot of the advice I've given today, and is a great way for people to access the advice.
Absolutely. We'll link it in the show notes. And yeah, Alison, thank you very much for joining us.